Hi, everyone. Welcome. Good evening for everyone in the evening, or if you're somewhere else, good morning or good afternoon. But welcome to the Pre-Health Integrative Medicine Club's first event of the school year. So thank you all for joining, and we're excited to have our first event. But before that, a brief overview of the club. So the Pre-Health Integrative Medicine Club has been around for a few years here at ASU. We are a hybrid club, so we do both online and in-person events, and we are focused on um, our main focus is integrative medicine. So we focus on both allopathic and alternative forms of medicine by doing various community engagement activities and learning from guest speakers who are professors at ASU or health professionals or medical students and so many other things. So our first event for today will be a guest speaker session by Dr. Chris Wharton, who is a professor at ASU. So Dr. Wharton, just a short bio. So Dr. Wharton is a professor of nutrition at ASU's College of Health Solutions, and he is going to give us a session on how we can get into research. So I'll pass it over to him.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. I think we got an intimate group tonight, so I'll share some slides and I'll just talk through a little bit about my background and my research and how I got involved myself, just by way of example, how you might do the same. But since, we have a small group, so feel free to ask questions throughout. I don't think I have even 20 minutes of slides here, and so I'm hopeful this can be more of a conversation with, questions and answers and things. But let me go ahead and pull this up and start this presentation. You see this okay?
Yep, we can see it.
Great. All right, and like I said, I'll talk a little bit about my background and research and things, and offer some thoughts along the way. But yeah, I'm Professor Wharton. I've been at ASU for 18 years. Somebody just complimented me the other day on my salt and pepper hair, which happened for the very first time. So I was like, oh, I'm feeling my 18 years now. But yeah, I've been here 18 years. I've seen lots of iterations of ASU and how it's been designed and redesigned, and done a lot of research along the way. And so it's an exciting place to be. And so I'm glad you all are here in your academic career as well. So I thought I'd start here though, because it's actually, I do welcome events with freshmen when they come to ASU, and I tell them this very thing every time that I meet with freshmen. And if you take nothing else away from tonight, I would hope that you would take this away, which is this. I hope that you take advantage of really, truly what is the largest, most advanced intellectual playground in human history, which sounds hyperbolic, right? It sounds like an exaggeration, but truly, when you think about it, I mean, ASU is the largest university in the country. We are, at the pinnacle of human knowledge right now. And constantly there's infusion of resources and the building of infrastructure and just this concentration of incredible intellectual power all in this small geographical area. And I always say that because, you can come to the university and you can just, do school, and kind of work to get your degree and learn what you're going to learn and be on your way. But there's no other time in your life when you're going to be surrounded by this amount of just incredible academic intellectual infrastructure and the number of and variety of experts in all these areas. Like any question you'd want to ask, you can probably find somebody to explore that question with. And so when you're at the university, it's just such an exciting time to be able to explore things that you may not have thought to explore before. And I can't impress upon you how exciting it is to be at a university, because once you leave the university, you'll be out there working a job, and hopefully that's intellectually interesting too. But it probably won't look the same. You probably won't be surrounded by buildings that are hundreds of millions of dollars filled with scientific equipment and all these scientific experts who are looking to find answers to really interesting questions. So take advantage of your time here in this way, which, if you're here thinking about getting involved in research, that's great. That's a good start. So just by way of background, I'm a professor in the College of Health Solutions here at ASU. And so I do research in sort of dietary health and sustainability related behavior change. But I got here via a really circuitous path. And I thought I'd talk a little bit through that, just a teeny bit, only because there's no one right way, to get into research or to establish an academic career, if that's of interest to you down the road. There are a million and one ways to do it, and mine was as weird and twisty turny as any other. I came through four different schools to get to where I am now. And so in my undergrad years, I started out at Benedictine University, which there is a branch of Benedictine actually in Mesa here in Arizona, but I went to the original campus, which is in Lisle, Illinois. I started out there, and I started out not at all related to health or nutrition or anything like that. I was a jazz performance guitar major, in fact. So my first 2 years in the university, I learned nothing about health. I was in philosophy classes and I was in music classes and these and like, gen ed courses. But otherwise, I was sitting there playing guitar, practicing scales. That was my start to college. It was about 2 years in though that I started to get a little burned out on guitar and simultaneously was realizing this is probably not going to be a fruitful career financially for me. And so I started thinking I needed to change. And it was around then that I actually transferred to the University of Illinois, um, where I finished up my undergrad degree. That's where I discovered nutrition. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. And then moved from there. Actually got my master's degree at University of Illinois too. Then came to ASU for a PhD. Then went to Yale University for a postdoc. But I'll talk a little bit about those things too. Um, yeah, so when I left Benedictine and I came to U of I, it was there that I got into nutrition. Actually, while I was at Benedictine, the second year I was there, I did take a nutrition course, and I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And it started out, the way I think a lot of things like this do, which is I was personally interested in how to eat healthfully. I was personally interested in physical activity and just being healthy. So I took that nutrition course, and it kind of piqued my interest. And so when I transferred to U of I got into nutrition as a degree program. And so I finished out my degree there. But this is the first place I think I took my first step that got me here. And had I not taken that step, I really can't even imagine what might have happened otherwise. So um, during my undergrad years at U of and I can't even remember how I did this, but I volunteered in a lab. A woman by the name of Dr. Elizabeth Jeffrey and a colleague of hers, Dr. John Erdman. So Dr. Jeffrey studied broccoli and Dr. Erdman studied tomatoes, and not just the vegetables, but phytochemicals within them. So they were doing this work, and like I said, I literally can't remember how I approached them to get involved in their research by volunteering in their labs, but somehow I did. It was that innocuous a step. It was that like sort of just some random thing I did as an undergrad. But had I not done that, I'm sure I would literally not be here today talking to you about all this. Like, I bet if I had not done that, my life would have taken a drastically different direction, and I have no idea what that might have looked like. But I did that, and I started volunteering and got enough sort of experience in the lab that when I finished my undergrad degree, and I decided to go on to a master's degree. And I became a research assistant, a grad student in their labs. I was sort of split between the two labs. And I spent the next 3 years studying broccoli and tomatoes. So if you didn't know somebody could dedicate 3 years of their life to studying produce, they can, and I did. But it was the phytochemicals. So actually, there are phytochemicals in broccoli called glucosinolates, and there are phytochemicals in tomato. Lycopene would be one, for example, and both of those in different ways can help reduce risk for prostate cancer. So all of my research then as a grad student was focused on how these phytochemicals might reduce risk for prostate cancer. But I tell you all that to just offer this lesson that I learned. Like, just begin before you're ready and just be curious. Like, you're at this amazing place, all this amazing work is going on. If you're curious about research, don't worry about having whatever skills you think you might need under your belt, like having lab experience or statistical experience or any of this. If you're interested, just go talk to somebody and try to follow your interests and just be curious. Just start that way and somebody might take you under their wing and you might start, studying broccoli and before you know it, you'll be, a professor at ASU, right? So just start there and you'll be on your way. So while I was at University of Illinois as a master's student, I was doing this work on these different phytochemicals. And when you're a master's student, even as an undergraduate as well, though, I'd point this out, when you're actively involved in research, you often get a chance to go to conferences. Like if you're an author on a piece of work that might end up being a poster or an oral presentation, you might even have the professor you work with might even have the funding to send you to conferences. I've certainly sent undergraduate students as well as my grad students to conferences to present on research that they've been involved in, just to give them a chance to see the world of science kind of at work. But in my time at U of I was working on these phytochemical studies, and because of that work, I had that chance to go to a conference, and it was there that I was meeting all sorts of people, and conferences and being involved in research. If you do get involved as an undergrad or grad student, it's a great way to network. Like you start meeting people in your field or in a possible field you might want to work in or do more research in, at different universities doing different things. And it was at a conference during my time as a grad student that I met a professor who knew a professor at ASU who was looking for a PhD student. So as I was finishing up my master's degree, I got this tip at a conference I was at just by having this random conversation with somebody. So I tracked this person down. His name was Dr. Jeffrey Hempel. He's no longer at ASU, but I tracked him down and sent him an email, and he said, "Oh yeah, I have a PhD spot. I'm looking to bring somebody on, and would you like to come for an interview?" And so it was through that networking, and that would be my sort of next lesson is to network, that I was able to connect with this guy and ended up being his graduate student, his PhD student. And that brought me from University of Illinois out to ASU as a PhD student. This is the early 2000s now. So that's when I got involved in, it wasn't the College of Health Solutions at the time. That's the College of Health Solutions is about a decade old now. But prior to that, the nutrition program was at the Polytechnic campus at ASU. And his lab was there, and I was doing my work there. So I completed my PhD, and now I'd gone from, learning about nutrition and phytochemicals in my graduate program and doing benchtop science to this program where he was actually much more involved in nutrition communication. Um, so that was interesting because I kind of went from cell culture and animal studies to people and talking about nutrition. So I got this whole new kind of focus. And so while I was there, I learned this whole new set of skills that set me up when I was finishing up my PhD, when I was looking for next opportunities. Yale University had an opening for a postdoc, and they were looking for somebody with nutrition expertise that could focus on policy. And that was sort of the next step upstream. I went from bench to people to policy, and that brought me then to Yale University for my postdoc. And I know this is probably beyond where some of you are in your academic careers, but I wanted to mention this because it was when I was at Yale. I was there for about a year and a half doing postdoc work, and we were in a building that was housed or that also housed this program, the Yale Sustainable Food Program. So up to this point, I'd been doing, nutrition science, nutrition communication, policy work. It was here that I learned for the first time about sustainable food systems. And I had never thought about that concept before, but that became really exciting for me. And it was even further upstream from policy. Like when we think about all these things that can affect health, food systems and how they're designed can really affect, our choices in the first place that eventually affect our health. So I got excited about that. And it was here that I really founded sort of my career, which from then on, I've been focused on dietary health and sustainable related behavior change. And so it was this whole process of finding new opportunities and truly seeking growth, that led me to pretty much where I got to today, which after this program, I got a job back at ASU as an assistant professor in nutrition. And so just a few thoughts then is really start out and just be curious and just get involved. Because again, it was not even a thought in the back of my head. I just started volunteering and it set me on this path. And I kept looking for opportunities and I kept seeking growth. And I learned more and more until I found the place I really wanted to do my work. So that brings me to ASU as an assistant professor. And I'll mention a few other things that I think might be useful to think about. When I got here, I started off my research. I was doing local foods research. So I was working on farmers markets and community supported agriculture programs. But I actually even started a small business on the side called Chow Locally. And I'm mentioning this because your intellectual pathways can include research per se, but they can also include, especially at ASU, non-research, but still intellectual pursuits. So entrepreneurship and innovation is another way to kind of stretch your intellectual legs. And that was something that I got involved in, and I've been involved in entrepreneurship ever since. And it's yet another way to be creative, to find ways to put new products, services, information, and value into the world. And so that was something that I got to do alongside doing research that led to publications and so forth. Overall, though, um, it was yet another way I thought I could have impact. And as you advance in your academic career, as you think about getting involved in research, like look for the thing that's interesting to you because you're curious about it, that's fun. But eventually, you might find a pathway that allows you to have impact. And that's the real exciting thing. When you can do a thing and answer a question and it's meaningful to the world, there's nothing more gratifying, really, period, at least for me. And so I think if you can find pathways to have impact through this, that would be another way to look at getting involved in research or research adjacent things. So just a few more things about what I'm up to these days. This whole crazier circuitous path, I started with a guitar in my hands and I ended up with food waste in my hands because now I'm a food waste researcher. What I focus on these days is working with households through behavioral interventions to help them reduce food waste in their homes. And the work that we've done recently, we've collaborated with the city of Phoenix, for example, and had some really interesting studies where we help people reduce their food waste, but also we help them end up with not even trying to, they end up eating healthier. So we're helping people think about the values of food and what it means to actually waste food. And when people start thinking about how important the value of food is, they not only try to reduce food waste, but they report back to us that, oh yeah, we're trying to eat healthier now, even though our interventions are not designed to change their dietary behaviors. So our work is really, my lab's work is really practically applied, really meant to have that impact as immediately as possible. Um, I'll skip this. There's a lot of interesting stats on food waste. It's a pretty huge problem, but it's one of those places where, you can have in your own personal life a really big impact. And so that's why it's a place that I really like to work because the research I do, I can find an answer. It can be implemented in a person's life like that, and that's exciting. I've done other work as well, though. I've looked a lot at protein quality and environmental impact. And briefly on this, for example, like when you look at dietary health, a lot of people get focused on, oh, to be healthy, I should just remove entirely this class of foods from my diet and I'll be good. Or if I want to be more sustainable in my diet, I should just stop eating this thing. And we were trying to combat that extremist sort of approach to diet a little bit because that prevails in the US quite a bit. This work was meant to show that if you look at protein quality and environmental impact simultaneously, you can rank foods in terms of how quality the food is for the least environmental impact. And to translate this little graphic here, if you're curious, peanuts end up being the highest quality protein for the least environmental impact. So if you love peanut butter and jelly, you're doing great. You're getting good quality protein and you're not having too much of an impact on the environment. Um, but it's not just about vegetarian foods. So you can see salmon and tuna are down there near peanuts, as are chicken and poultry. So this was more to say, if you want to be healthy and sustainable when it comes to protein choices, there are sometimes proteins and all the time proteins. Beef is a pretty big offender when it comes to climate impact. So, but if you love beef, you don't have to just remove it from your diet. You can have it some of the time. And maybe you have poultry more of the time, or you have peanut-based dishes more of the time. It's a way to sort of balance things while still being healthy and sustainable. Um, I've done other sort of side research that is interesting to me, but I think is important and potentially impactful. So our lab did some work a few years back to focus on how screens can impact health-related behaviors, but not just screen time use generally, which is what you usually hear about. We actually try to partition it. What types of screens impact what types of behaviors? We found, for example, that heavy users of smartphones reported the lowest quality of sleep, which you might guess, right? Like when you go to bed, do you do this before you go to sleep and stare at your phone for a little while, right? Those sorts of things. Heavy TV and smartphone users reported the least helpful dietary patterns compared to other users. TV in particular, people like to snack and eat meals in front of TV. And when that happens, oftentimes people will eat more calories without even realizing it. So we've done lots of work in the realm of health behaviors and sustainability behaviors as well. But that's about 20 minutes. So this is, I think, is my last slide. The last thing I just wanted to say is if you're interested in getting involved in research, what could you do right now? Well, do the first thing that I did, which like I said, I hardly thought about, but meet with your professors and find out if there's something that's interesting that you're curious about that you could potentially be involved in. I have students ask me all the time, if they can be involved in my research in one way or another, small ways and big ways. And oftentimes you'll find somebody who can give you a spot and give you some aspect of a project they're working on. I'd also say to find programs where you can stretch your intellectual legs. This whole idea of entrepreneurship and innovation as like an alternative approach to research, but to explore questions and answer questions. A lot of that is built into a lot of programs. I remember working with some industrial design students a while back, and they were literally innovating new products as a classroom project. But there's also E&I entrepreneurship and innovation programs at ASU that you can get involved in, get into team competitions and think of new products and services in the realm of health, for example. And then lastly, just volunteer. That could be volunteering in a lab, that could be volunteering out in the community, but those connections will drive your curiosity and maybe send you more towards, oh, I think I'd like to do this type of research. But just getting involved in things in areas that you have interest in and finding out what the problems are and what solutions are needed set you up to find research that you hopefully will find more impactful. So I'll stop this slide deck here and thank you, and I'm happy to chat.
Yes, thank you so much for that. And it was really great to like hear your experience about how you started as a music major and then went on to become a nutrition professor. So that was really interesting. So for everyone who's in here, feel free to unmute yourselves or you could ask your question in the chat. But I do have a few questions. So while everyone's thinking of something, I have some questions about research. So the first one is what resources or opportunities could students take advantage of early on? And this also ties on to another question of if we don't have prior lab experiences, what would be the best way to show professors that they're capable and motivated?
Uh, I literally showing up is 95% of the game. So just ask the question like I'm curious, I'm interested, I'd like to be involved. That's the first thing. It may not be that you get involved in some deeper aspect of maybe an ongoing research project, but um, what happened with me, for example, when I first volunteered in a lab at U of I as an undergraduate, I got paired up with a PhD student. And so I was in the lab with that PhD student helping her run samples, which were these samples of like broccoli extracts actually. And so I was helping her put these into a centrifuge and run them down so that she could get ready to do some experiments with them. And so I literally just knowing nothing was working with like $100,000 piece of equipment the next day under the tutelage of a PhD student. But those are the types of opportunities that come up. You might get paired with a graduate student who could give you smaller tasks to start to learn kind of what's going on in a project. You might have a chance to work in a lab, maybe doing again like sort of smaller tasks, but you start to see the outlines of a project going on. Sometimes undergrads I've had involved in my studies, they actually help me with data collection. So when I brought participants in to do studies, I've gotten undergraduates trained up. You get city certified, which means you are capable of running research in an ethical way. So you have to do some training, but that's accessible to everyone, undergrads on up. And then you get some training with lab managers or other lab personnel or the professor, him or herself, and then you're ready to go. And so you don't have to have any experience. You just show up and say you're interested and ready to learn, and you're good to go.
Nice. Right. And also we have like in our club a lot of online students at ASU and some of them may not live in Arizona but want to work with ASU professors. So what's your advice for them like for working in the science fields?
For sure. So, in fact, I was just meeting with a student in one of my classes today who lives in LA and was asking this very same question. And yeah, so there may be some other limitations, like actually being in the lab, physically is not possible. But there are lots of researchers, I'm one of them, who does some research online. So, doing online survey-based research, that was something I pivoted to quite a bit during the pandemic since we were having a hard time, being in person doing anything. And so you might be involved there again with a graduate student or lab personnel or the professor themselves, learning how to design a survey. That's a skill set that's really important for all sorts of jobs. And then deploying that survey and learning the technology that's online to do that. You may be involved in incentivizing participants to complete those surveys, right? So lots of skills that can still be garnered even if you're an online student, and lots of ways you can still get involved in, real research.
Right. And I think that also relates to one of the questions in the chat. Would you know any program at ASU or somewhere else that's currently accepting students?
So yeah, usually the program itself isn't quote unquote accepting students. If you're involved in research, it's going to be more so the opportunities you find connecting with individual professors or individual labs. And so if you're taking classes with lots of different faculty, reach out to those faculty and say, hey, I've got this interest in whatever, cardiovascular health. And I'm curious about this particular dietary approach. Do you know of anybody who's exploring something like this? Or I'm interested in the gut microbiome. What faculty are at ASU who I could talk to just to learn more? And that gives you the opportunity to connect and then to ask those questions and then see if there might be spots for getting involved in research.
Right. So, reaching out to those connections through professors definitely should work. Um,
Hmm.
and we have a question, Chrissy. There you are.
Hi, Dr. Wharton. Thank you so much. This has been really informative. And I have a couple of questions actually. So, the first question is so I'm an online student and I'm kind of close enough to Arizona State University that I could drive there. It's kind of a long drive, 6 hours. But
Long
like
drive.
what's the yeah, yeah. But as a professor, what would you say is like the best way for someone to reach out, someone that's like not even on campus to say like, hey, I'll be in town for however long. Is it possible to connect, or should we kind of establish that rapport before we get there? What's kind of best practices for that?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Again, it might be more like a one-on-one thing of the professors from of the classes that you're taking that you have the most comfortable relationship with. You might say like if you might have an interest in research right off the bat of in a particular area, ask them to help you navigate like to the right person or people to just talk more about it. If not, and you're just wanting to visit with folks, you might reach out to those same professors and say, I would just love to learn more about all that's going on. I would like to actually make a visit and meet with some faculty. And usually, I mean, faculty are kind of all over the place. We're doing lots of different things, but we can make it work to so that we can sit down and meet with students and just talk about things that are going on so you could learn more. And again, I think that's just literally reaching out to those you already have connections with. You could probably also do that through an academic advisor that you might have a good relationship with. Um, and they could then reach out to us professors to do something like that.
Hey, thank you. And I did have one more question. So, as an undergrad, or I guess at any level, what would you say is best practices? Is it better to just focus on like one research project at a time in one lab, or is it acceptable to be working on in different labs, but maybe like in the same area? Um, yeah.
Yeah, good question. So if you're volunteering, I think it's totally up to you what makes sense to, I would, if I were you, I guess I would think a little bit about like, what do I want to learn? I mean, first it might just be, let me just get in there and see what it's all about. I have no idea. Let me just figure it out. And you might, benefit from being in one or two labs and doing some different things. There are sometimes opportunities for paid positions. And so if you are, willing and able to commit more hours and you wanted to get trained up and play this particular role in a lab, those faculty who have ongoing grants for projects might have undergraduate, hourly positions, or there might be graduate hourly positions as well. So it would sort of depend on that. Like if you landed a position, then you'd probably be focused on that one lab, committing, 5, 10, 15, whatever, however many hours, you'd want to commit. So, but yeah, if you're volunteering, I wouldn't maybe volunteer in more than a couple labs at a time, only because you might start to be spread thin and you might not to, I don't want to say be useful enough, but It's students volunteering in labs. Sometimes it's as much about training a student in an area as it is about, having some quality work done for the a project. And because it's more a training opportunity, you want to be able to make use of that training. So that's what I would say to that.
At the university level, is it basically like students can just enter the lab, or is there any kind of supplemental learning that maybe we should do before we get there to be more prepared, like lab techniques or anything like that?
Yeah, good question. I think it would just depend on the lab that you might be getting involved in. There's nothing that is like general that you would have to do other than probably, like I said, city certification. So any professors who are conducting any research at ASU, or really anywhere, you're getting IRB approval to do it. That's Institutional Review Board. And that just means that you've gone through and shown the university, this is the project and how we're going to run it. And they tell you, okay, change these things, and that ensures that it will be ethically conducted, right? And so all the personnel on the project also have to go through training to ensure they understand how to conduct research ethically. And so you'd have to do that. Anybody doing research usually would do that. Beyond that, the specific techniques, once a professor says, yeah, come on in and do this work with us, they would then train you on the specific techniques needed for any kind of specific research.
Cool, thank you. And
Yeah.
thank you, Bean.
Thanks, Chrissy, for those questions. And I see we have a question in the chat. So someone's asking, can we get to research with, I believe it's an associate's degree, if I'm getting that correct, in biology, while going to ASU for a bachelor's degree? So if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I guess if you mean, can you be involved in like volunteering for research or having a paid position, like an undergraduate hourly position in research? Sure. Yeah, there's nothing stopping you at all. If you're a student at ASU, and you're on ASU's campus, or you're in a program, you're absolutely eligible to do any research, as long as a professor, wants to work with you and has an opportunity for you. So nothing stopping you given that background at all.
Yeah, like there's definitely nothing wrong in asking, I'd say, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So I did have one more question because I saw that you did a postdoc after your PhD. But for some students who may be interested in getting into academia, like I'd like to get a PhD in the health sciences after my bachelor's degree. But what's your opinion on, um, you know, instead of going straight out of your bachelor's degree into a PhD, like maybe taking a year or two to do like a post-bac or something, a research program at a university, or maybe working at a research oriented like company and getting that experience, and how may it help you for going to a PhD and beyond?
Good question. Lots of complexities there. So, and then you just get into sort of like the messy life stuff, which is, once you complete an undergrad degree, if you go off and try to do work for a while, that's a fantastic thing to do. You can start to make some money and kind of explore other parts of just going out there and adulting. Do you want to be in a relationship, have a family, get married, and these sorts of things too, right? Um, it it can. I wouldn't dissuade anybody from doing that at all. You do just introduce other priorities, and so you just start to think about, oh, where can I be, in the world, to get back into academia, if you're, say, now with a spouse who's got a job, and these sorts of things. So it's just being thoughtful about like how kind of life plays out once you leave the university. But having some experience, can definitely be helpful. Anything that is going to garner you skills that would be useful getting back into academia for the research you're interested in doing will be fantastic. Yeah, so leaving university would not be a detractor at all. Especially you're coming back and you've got like more stats under your belt or particular techniques under your belt or something like that. So that's always useful. I ended up myself going from direct from undergrad to grad to PhD to postdoc. It just kind of worked out that way. Um, you know, Depending on the career path you're looking at, more often than not, the more experience academically, the better these days. So, um, having a postdoc under your belt makes you more, excuse me, competitive. Like if you're interested in, say, an academic position as an assistant professor at some point, especially in the world of health and health sciences, postdocs are becoming pretty required. Like having a really good publication record, having a lot of experience under your belt, a number of techniques and things that to show that you can hit the ground as an assistant professor and start to be productive and be independently active in research. So if leaving the university and getting some work experience contributes to that, then I think that would be great.
Cool. Yeah, and kind of related to that question, but for those who are interested in going to grad school and doing research and, having a research career in general, what other skills would you think are important in addition to like lab techniques and, just read lab oriented stuff?
A few things. First things first, when it comes to grad degrees, immediately from your mind, eliminate the notion of prestige and all of that stuff. Like master's degrees, PhDs, all these things are anymore. They're just tools that you should determine whether you need or not to do the thing you want to do in life. So if you want to be an assistant professor at a university, yes, you'll need probably a PhD and probably a postdoc beyond that too, right? But if you're wanting to teach alone at some institutions, you may only need a master's degree. And so you should tailor your grad career based on that. Like, how far do I need to go in order to accomplish the thing I want to accomplish? And I say that too because grad programs pay money, but not a lot. You're not like accruing for retirement, right? You don't have a 401k going usually as a graduate student. And so you are postponing a little bit these other kind of real important things in life when you go to grad school. Hopefully you're doing it for a good reason, right? But that is something to take into consideration. Um, in terms of other skills that would be really helpful, it's good to be a good solid writer and a good presenter, or to at least be working towards that. And that's because a lot of what we do as a professor or being in the world of academia, you're writing grant proposals. When you do the work that you do, you want to go out there and publish papers or present at scientific conferences or present to the public. If you care about your work being recognized by people just in the real world, you want to be able to go out there and explain why what you're doing is important. And so, if you have those communication skills under your belt, it will be so, so helpful. People will look to you all the time, to talk about work, about the science that's going on. There are a lot of researchers I know who are not very good communicators, and I think it can be a real detriment to getting like their really important work out the door and recognized by people.
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna pivot a little here with my next question, but I mean, if anyone has a question, feel free to like raise your hand and put it in the chat. And but I think it's kind of impossible to not talk about this, but with AI being on the news everywhere now, how do you think that's going to affect research careers and maybe new students who are going to begin their journey just now?
Well, I'm going to take President Crow's tack on this. The president of our university, he's gung ho about AI. And I think it will be with any, fast moving, innovative technology, it'll probably be a bumpy road to figure out exactly how we use it as a tool and not as a surrogate for thinking. And so that's um, this is the hard part. We're busy and we're trying to get stuff done, and AI can help us get stuff done faster. And I think that's great. So long as you're not cutting corners in your own thinking by just letting AI supplant your own thinking to get a product out the door. That's kind of the concern. But for example, I am doing some consulting work with a company in Canada that's involved in like food rescue, and then food donations. And we did a bunch of interviews with people in Flagstaff. And in qualitative research, you have usually, one methodology would be to have two readers. You read through the transcripts of say interviews you did, and then you have a second reader, and then you code those and you figure out what themes match. And then that helps you conduct a more sort of rigorous thematic analysis of qualitative data. In this case, as the only researcher on the project, I read through the interviews and then I asked AI to do a reading as well. And it came back with themes, and I came back with themes. And so AI was my second reader, and it worked out pretty well. It matched up quite a bit with what I found. And that was a useful way, I think, to allow AI to do a job for you without sort of reducing my intellectual contribution to a thing. Um, sorry, I'm being long-winded. The concern, I think, is just like supplanting thinking, and then you don't really have like the basic skills, critical thinking skills, in a particular area because you let AI do it for you. That's the concern. But used right, it will advance you, move you faster, get more done, create new insights. I think it's profound and exciting.
Right, interesting. So, another question, like, what is one thing that you gained from doing research that you didn't expect at first?
Oh, that's a good question. Uh, I mean, I guess the one thing I would say, and specific to my own work, but just like the insights that you have from doing research often lead you to unexpected conclusions. Like, so I'll give an example. When I was doing this work early on with local food systems, I was interviewing these people who were involved in a CSA. So it's a community supported agriculture program. So that's when people pay up front to a local farm and they get weekly allotments of the fruits and vegetables the farm is growing. So it's a nice community program because you financially support a farm and you get this healthy food in return. And we were doing this research asking them how this was affecting them. And they told us a thing that I never would have expected. They said, actually, we feel really guilty if we waste this food. So we work really hard to use the food we get in the CSA program. But they felt really differently about the same, like identical looking food they might get from a grocery store. So the bunch of carrots they got from Crooked Sky Farm down the road, they worked real hard to eat all that up. But if they got a bunch of carrots from the grocery store, it was easier to sort of let that go to waste. So there is something about this like um, rediscovery of the value of food in this program that moved them towards eating healthier and wasting less food. And so, I mean, that's a real specific insight that caught me by surprise. But the larger notion is, when you ask questions, the answers you get can be crazy sometimes, can be totally not what you're expecting. And so I sort of always thought of research as like this iterative step-by-step process. You ask a question, you get this small answer, and you keep moving. But actually, research for me has been like this and this way and sort of all over the place. And that's been surprising and exciting.
Right, thanks. And I have one last question, but before that, if anyone else wanted to drop a question in the chat or ask something before we finish, I'll give you a few seconds. All right, while you're thinking, if you have anything, you can always drop it in the chat. But last question is if you could give one, oh, how to join the club. Yes, I'll go over that. Yes, definitely. If you could give one piece of advice to students starting out, what would it be? And I remember you mentioned this kind of in the beginning about ASU and its opportunities, but what's one piece of advice you could give for us students?
Just be excited to do school different. Like, I think thinking about going to the university, there's sort of like the standard, yeah, we'll go to classes, we'll learn this stuff, we'll hit some parties, we'll see some sports, it'll be great, and all of that is fantastic. But think about like this rare opportunity to do something different. Like this decision of mine to volunteer in a lab took me on this pathway, and I could not be happier, more excited to have this position that I'm in now, a professor at this major university. Um, so take advantage of this like unique spot and time and geographic location in your life and do something different with it. Try to do something different that you would not have expected to do. And volunteering for research is potentially one of those things.
Thanks. And one other question from the chat. What is the best piece of advice you have for undergrads to prepare for grad school?
Ah, it would be to hone your sort of like go get 'em skills. And what I mean by that is in undergrad, and this is a thing about life, like just life in general. And as you advance through life, this is something I've learned, and it takes a long time to learn, but especially in undergrad, a lot of what you're expected to do is, you get an assignment and you respond to that assignment and you get tests and you respond to these questions and so forth. But as you move into grad school, you start to, a little bit, as a master's student, you're still under the tutelage of people, right? But you start to become your own intellectual leader. Like you read the science and you find out what questions are still out there and you, excuse me, potentially can suggest to your professor, like, this is something that's interesting. I think we should look into it. And you can like forge your own path and ask your own questions and then answer your own questions. And like in grad school, as in life, you start to realize that the whole adulting thing, like it's really you being your own leader and you deciding what's next for you and trying to make that a successful next step. Grad school is like that. And as you move from master's to PhD, you're absolutely are expected to, you come up with your question, you design your study, you make sure it's good and rigorous, you go do it, you tell us the answer, you know? And that's like the interesting progression.
Perfect, thanks. And then one more question we have. How did you go about navigating times of failure in your research, experiments, or academics, and how did you push through?
Mm. Lots of failures, lots of failures. And so I've always been super sensitive and I didn't handle failure well early on. So there's all the sort of like trite stuff about, a failure is like, your chance to learn, and it truly is that. Um, I think what I would say though is that, when you have failures, it is an opportunity to just like reflect and pivot as needed, and to start to be, I mean, with all things, to start to be. I'm forgetting what the analogy is. Like, be like a goldfish. I think my kid's soccer coach says, like you can reflect on it for a second, take the lesson, but then move on. And so I have had to learn, and it's taken me years to do it, to not let a failure plague me because it has in the past. When I've messed something up, when I've said something stupid, because I have gotten in front of groups of people and said stupid, I won't use the word, but I've said some just dumb things. And I've made mistakes in research and everything else, but that's what people do, right? And so if you can figure out how to move past that pretty quick, because your next step might be successful and move on, that's the way to do it.
Perfect, some really important lessons. Um, any last questions that anyone has? Feel free to drop it in the chat. But otherwise, if no one else has any questions, thank you so much, Dr. Wharton, for this talk. And it was really insightful to learn both about your experiences and the advice that you have for students, because we have many like online and in-person students at ASU who are wanting to get into research at both the undergrad and graduate level. So thank you so much for that. And also for those who are interested in joining the club, um, please fill out this form on our website. I'll drop the link again in the chat. If you're not a member already, please fill that out, and you can also join us on Sun Devil Central, so you can receive event updates and things like that. Um, Also, another reminder for if you haven't already, um, please fill out this attendance form, and we can mark your attendance and we'll send you out a feedback form, an optional feedback form, so you can share your experience about the event. But thank you all for coming and joining us this evening for Dr. Wharton's talk. And I don't see any other questions, so we'll wrap it up now. Thank you all, and stay tuned for more information because we have a few more events scheduled in October. Thank you and have a great day.
Thanks, Mina. Bye-bye.
Bye.